Welcome everyone to the Week 13 edition of Beyond the Model presented by Occupy Fantasy. NFL DFS picks, lineup advice, GPP strategies, all that and some more with Occupy Fantasy. I'm your co-host Moose at CFB_Moose on Twitter is where you can find me. Co-founder and data guru here at OccupyFantasy.com. Alongside Brian at BrianJesterFF on Twitter. He is the co-founder and CEO of Occupy Fantasy. Brian, I got a screenshot of you here in the background instead of our daily plug. How's it going, man?
I'm feeling pretty good, obviously, after Thursday night, and yeah, pretty big screenshot there. Feeling good about it. We can talk about that here in a little bit. So yeah, if you guys have questions about that, certainly can answer them. But we're gonna be in Arizona here in 2 weeks, and most will definitely do some content around that. I'm thinking we'll definitely do a recap show on Tuesday when we get back, like we used to do for the live finals. So be on the lookout for that.
Yeah, the rare $1 million mission that's not a part of the $1 million mission anymore because that show's canceled. But yeah, we'll get some. We might have to bring back the Occupy Fantasy Football podcast or whatever the old shows we used to call back in the day were. But yes, Brian is going to a live final, and not to spend too much time on it, Brian, but I think you and I would both agree that this live final is very different than other live finals for the upside that it has.
Just insane upside for this. And for those who have read our Ultimate Guide, have been Occupy Fantasy, it's the satellite strategy. And I honestly wasn't trying that hard to qualify for the championship. And I literally turned an $8 satellite ticket in my vast allocation on Monday into a $470 ticket, which I turned into this live final ticket here. And the live final is 200 people in Arizona for week 15. Min cash is $20,000, so we get $20,000 just for showing up. First place is 2.5 million, so a 200-player league with $2.5 million up top. So playing for a lot in week 15.
Yeah, and it actually raises a question. We've kind of talked about it before. Live finals they're one of the things that you normally don't chase because they're very expensive. You turn the $8 into this $70,000 ticket, but it also comes to a sense where, let's say if you do some sort of satellite strategy and you get a ticket, whether it's a big ticket or a live final ticket where you already know you're already getting 20,000 at the bottom, do you readjust some of your allocation towards satellites to kind of piggyback on that? Like, let's say normally you do 5% of your bankroll a week on satellites. Does it go up to 25, 50% on a very aggressive estimate, trying to get one more of these big tickets that you have, because there's only 2 weeks. So one more week of this, and if you don't get it, oh well, I'm still getting a shit ton of money from getting potentially last place, or you kind of just staying with your normal allocation.
Yeah, I think for live finals in particular, it makes sense to allocate a little more after you get one. For any other ticket, I don't think so, because the floor for those are zero, right? You can still spend a lot of money, get an extra ticket, and still get back $0. Where here, if I spend an extra 4 or 5K, just for example, and get another ticket somehow, that's an additional 15K if I spend 5K, right? So the floor is there for live final. So I will try here a little bit harder the next couple of weeks to get one more ticket. Bringing you along as a guest. We'll see if I can get two more guests if I can get another ticket.
Yes, absolutely. And as we said in the staff chat, you were like, I'm sweating this live final ticket. I said, I'm also sweating because I have a chance to be the guest. So, but yeah, so I see a bunch of people here in the chat saying congratulations to you, Brian. Yes, congratulations. Let's hope we can get one more ticket, or you can get one more ticket there. And then look out for content around it as well as post of it. But yeah, we wanted just to talk about that really quick, about the satellite strategy, how Brian turned $8 into this live final ticket. It doesn't have to be just this particular type of contest. It could be the Millie Maker. It could be anything. Cross-sport satellites are great. Go ahead and check out our strategy guides and our ultimate guide as well to learn more about the satellite strategy. And we think more people should be playing it. But yeah, so we want to take that little detour. And Brian, now on to our regular scheduled programming of DraftKings and FanDuel lineup advice. As I said, the keywords in the beginning of the show to entice the YouTube algorithm. You and I were talking a little bit before, Brian. I think this is a slate I really like. I don't know about you. What are your high-level thoughts around it?
Yeah, I think it looks pretty good, right? I think there are a couple spots that the field will gravitate towards. We have the jam 'em in backup running back, which we should probably start the conversation around.
Yeah.
But there are also some other stacks that I like too, some injury targeting stacks. If you guys remember last week, right, we talked about targeting injuries Kyron Williams was a big injury target for us, right? Returning. Arizona was missing 3 defenders. There were a couple other spots we were looking at. All of them hit. It was a really big week last week. And we got a couple spots like that this week, so I'm curious to talk about it. But I think we have to talk about the Daily Plug cover boy. And Moose, you were talking to me right before the show started about our conservative ownership projections in general, but how high Moss's ownership already is projected, and we're not even halfway through Saturday yet.
Yeah, so for anyone that's follow us, we have our projected ownership as well in our daily model. Ownership for DraftKings, FanDuel, and Yahoo for all the players. And when it gets above 15-20%, we're usually pretty conservative on that. Usually they go off a lot higher, but just the way our algorithm works, it's very condensed on a lot of things. So, but we still, on top of that, we have Zach Moss at 42%, which Brian, if I'm thinking right, I think this is the highest projected running back we've ever had. And considering our ownership is pretty conservative, I can easily see him in 60% of contests in, the small field 100-man league, stuff like that. I could see him get 80, 90, even 100%, I think, in some cases, in some of the smaller contests.
I think in some contests, right, like double ups, 50-50s, head-to-heads, 10, 20 player GPPs, if he's not 100%, it's a mistake. So for those of you who have been under a rock, JT, Jonathan Taylor, injured his thumb, he had surgery, he's out. Moss is just $4,600 on DraftKings. What is he on FanDuel, Moose?
5,600.
So just as cheap, relatively speaking. And we haven't had this opportunity too many times this year, but we've talked about it at length on this channel over the past few seasons. Talked about my 100K win jamming in Jalen Samuels, backup Pittsburgh running back. Generally, when we have these situations, we understand it looks nice to get a lot of leverage by fading these types of players, but more often than not, we see pros go 99 to 100% exposure on these types of players. Just get over the field. Just play 100%. He's too cheap for his role. He's the number 1 running back in our model by like 10 or 15 points. Yeah. Just play him. There is some, Moose, if he's going to be like, if he's legit going to be 60, 70% in large field GPPs, which he could in some, I think there has to be some merit in fading him if he does bust. Because we've talked about before, like 30, 40%. 60, 70 is a little bit, that's kind of crazy. I still think I'm going to go 100%, but for those of you with a high-risk mindset, I do think there is some merit. Unlike some similar slates in the past, if he's going to be that highly owned, I think there is some merit to not playing him.
See, I originally thought that as well, but then I looked back at weeks 2 through 5 when JT was out as well, and the fact that Zach Moss averaged 83-84% of snaps and just scored like 2 touchdowns every week. We know what he's actually #good, so we know what he is. Yeah. So I think going the 100% route is a way better long-term strategy than going the 0% route, especially at 40 at his price point. Now, if he was like 5-6K, like maybe JT was questionable, they released the salaries and he was ruled out, so he's a little overpriced. Or just a little bit underpriced, then I think it would make sense to potentially go 0. But 4,600, where he basically should be like 9K, is just insane. And but the other values as well allows you to fit in so much more studs that I don't. Yeah. It would be very difficult to not go 100%.
Yeah. No. Again, and our official recommendation, just for the record, is play Zach Moss in every single lineup you make tomorrow. That's the official recommendation. If you're making 300 lineups, 450 lineups, or you really have a high risk mindset and you're making 150, sure, you can consider it. But just for everyone's sake, our official recommendation, play him in 100% of your lineups.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I see we have some questions here. Again, if you guys have questions, we're here until 2 o'clock sharp. I have an appointment I need to go to afterwards, so we're leaving right then and there. Get your questions in. But we're going to be here talking about different stacks, what we like about them, talk about some new meta stacks and some wide receivers, some touchdown, all that good stuff that we like. First one here from David says, what's your thoughts on the Commander stack with 1-2 Miami bringbacks, and congrats on your live final.
Thanks, David. Yeah, we obviously like that game in general, Miami, Washington. Let's just start with that one most. And again, since you have to leave at 2, we'll blow through these pretty quickly. But Miami, biggest favorite on the card. Historically, we have not played underdog quarterbacks. And as Chris said in our Discord this morning, we don't necessarily need to save the salary, but we know that Washington passes at a crazy high level. Mm-hmm. And even as 10-point dogs at their cheap price tags, they can get there in tournaments. And then, yeah, obviously you can bring it back with all the studs on Miami. So the preferred method is just stacking Miami. I ran a lot of lineups this morning using our rules and some player exposures. Most of the top projected lineups were Miami, of the Miami variety. So I think you can play Washington. I don't know if I'd played in like a single entry or anything. I think there's too much value elsewhere to force a 10-point underdog stack.
Makes sense to me. Yeah. I like it. I mean, McLaurin, third ranked wide receiver in our model, underperforming wide receiver. We've seen, Brian, you've seen firsthand how well underperforming wide receivers can be with DK Metcalf on Thursday. So there is some in that stack. I do like Washington. It just seems a little too risky for like the small field stuff, but hate it. I think 2 Miami bringbacks is a little much. But speaking of Miami, though, with Achane coming back, he said he's 100%. I know also last time before he got hurt, he said he was 100%. Are you mixing him in at all, or is it just kind of not on your radar?
Torched my bankroll last time. He was 10% owned. I'm hoping he's lower owned this time because all shit, here we go again. .jpg. I think if he's gonna be, we've seen what he can do when he's healthy. He said he's 100% healthy. It's been precautionary that they've been holding him out. I'm gonna play Achane again as the biggest favorite on the card, as the most explosive running back on the card on the slate. I think you have to. I think you have to use Achane, not in every lineup or anything, but like you have to use him in your player pool. I'm definitely going to get overweight, and if he gets hurt again, so be it. I just listen. They're very conservative, right? We've talked in the past about Green Bay being a conservative medical staff, but even their players this week, Miami, have talked about how conservative their staff has been, making sure they get back to 100%. So they would not put Achane out there if he was not 100%. So I trust that. They say the re-injury risk is very low. It's kind of a fluke what happened last time. So, yeah, I'm going to play Achane heavily. He ranks above Mostert in the model this week. And anytime we get lowered ownership on a guy with 40-point ceilings, that's how you win tournaments.
Absolutely, yeah. So definitely a high-risk play for me. Let's see here. And then Matt says, a Pittsburgh stack this week opens up a lot of options given the salary savings, but I'd be less scared to drink a glass of curdled milk than playing Pittsburgh stacks. That is a fantastic comparison. Is this a viable strategy? Brian, yes. And to answer Matt's question, I do like the Pittsburgh stack. They are on my stack rankings. I think I have them as tier like 2.5, like 1.5. So they're like not the top, not the second. They fit pretty well. Big thing for me is both cornerbacks are out for Arizona, and both wide receivers, Jonte Johnson, George Pickens, are underperforming wide receivers. It's like a trifecta, whatever quadception thing is, but 4 good things in a row leading for Pittsburgh. So I do like that side. Probably wouldn't bring it back, but there are some bring back pieces. But to answer your question, Matt, I do like the Pittsburgh stack this week.
Yeah, quite the poetic way. Maybe perhaps the most poetic way to ask a stat question on this channel we've seen. But yeah, Moose, you hit it on, right? Both the starting corners out for Arizona. We talk about perfect storm scenarios when a receiver is underperforming and there's some sort of situational factor boosting them, and there's an injury to the opposing defense. Remember, they fired offensive coordinator Matt Canada last week. They had 400 yards of offense for the first time since like George Bush was president or something. So that's the situational factor. They're underperforming, and both opposing starting corners are out. So I'm going to be heavy on Pittsburgh stacks. The fear, obviously, is that Arizona's terrible in all facets, and they just run down their throat with Najee Harris and Jalen Warren. Very possible. But I think this is a spot Pittsburgh could put up 30, and it's not a spot that most people will be on. So to answer your question, yeah, get the curdled milk ready. But I think Pittsburgh's in a great spot here. And you can run it back with Trey McBride, number 1 tight end in our model. James Conner's been splitting some work at running back with Michael Carter, the recent addition, so I'm not sure I'd bring him back with a running back. But just monitor the receiver situation as well. Marquise Brown didn't practice all week. He's questionable. Their coach said he's trending in the right direction on Friday. We'll see if he suits up on Sunday. Michael Wilson remains out, which means our boy Greg Dortch is going to be starting. Ran 43 routes last week. So definitely a cheap piece to bring it back with. And overall, just an incredibly cheap stack. You pair it with Zach Moss, you can play McCaffrey, Tyreek, whoever the hell else you want to play in that lineup. So I really do like it.
Yeah, that's kind of what we've talked about, these new meta stacks of playing these cheap stacks, running back with some cheap pieces, especially when there's value, and it allows you to fit in these huge studs that apparently are just going to go off for 40 points a game. And so you don't need Pittsburgh to put up 25 points per player in your stack. You just need him to not do completely awful.
Here's the thing, though. I think they have the opportunity to actually put up 25 per person in this matchup.
Absolutely, yeah, at 100%. Sean here has a question. Says, "Yo, what's up, gents? Where can I find detailed breakdown on what defenses each team plays and what certain receivers' expected value is in relation to those defenses?"
Yes, I know this has made its rounds on Twitter. I know FTN has a tool. I'm not convinced of the predictive nature of it. A lot of people seem to talk about it. If you use that tool on Thursday, it said that you shouldn't play DK Metcalf and that you shouldn't play CD Lamb based on whatever. I think it's more descriptive than predictive. However, if you want to read the descriptive data, Sean, FTN is the tool I think that has it, and PFF has some data as well.
BK Mark says, "Afternoon." He says, "Playing Chuba, but it feels gross." But ... So Brian, I'll be honest, I haven't really checked out Chuba on my radar. Have you at all?
I got some takes.
Okay.
I got some takes. So I know Moose, for those who've been following along, Moose is in some big DraftKings, the big DraftKings survivor pools, some other big survivor pools. I know Tampa Bay is on your radar for tomorrow, and one of the issues I know that you're tinkering with now is there are so many defensive entries for Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
Their top 3 linebackers are out: Devin White, Levante David, and the rookie. I'm gonna butcher his first name, so I'll just say his last name, Dennis. So top 3 linebackers are out. Their starting corner, Jamel Dean, is out. Chris Godwin is a game time decision, which if it hurts their offense at all, that's more a potential offense for Carolina's side. So I agree, BK. It is very gross to play Chuba, but he's still the lead back there. And if all these guys are missing for Tampa, I think it's something you have to consider.
I mean, I'm looking here. Chuba Hubbard, 5,300 on DraftKings, 6,200 on FanDuel, projected for less than 2% on both sites. Feels gross, but it's one of those things where now that it's now on my radar now, I might have to take a look at it. Yeah. Interesting. Let's see here. Eli says, "Who do you prefer more at quarterback in a single entry large field GPP, Purdy or Carr?"
I would say, Moose, if you look at our rankings, I really like the Detroit game overall. It's one of my top ranking stacks.
Yeah.
San Francisco and Philly is right behind it. I would probably, on a normal week, say use the salary savings with Carr, but we have so many values that I think you can play an expensive Purdy stack and get away with it. This is by far the most expensive stack on the slate. So I think I'll go Purdy, if just knowing the risk of playing a large field single entry contest.
I mean, but think of it this way, Brian. If you play New Orleans, you can play all 3K wide receivers. Lynn Bowden
That's
Jr.,
true.
3K, 5,200 on FanDuel. A.T. Perry, 3,300 on DraftKings, 5,700 on FanDuel. Keith Kirkwood, 3K, 4,900. Juwan Johnson, I think 3,400. 4,900. So you can just absolutely jam in studs, and when they score 3 points total offense, you can just say, but the value. But yeah, I like that game. I think that it's one of those things where the New Orleans games could be just like a 2-0 stack. You just pick one of these super cheap run part of your stacks. Probably would lean Juwan Johnson. Just so many entries at the wide receiver point. And then you could run it back with Sam Laporta if you want to be crazy and do a double tight end. I'm on Ross St. Brown's. I think for me, I would go Carr, but who knows? But I think either way is fine. Pick, what do they always say? Flip a coin, and whichever side you wanted to land on, go with that side.
Yeah, I would say just build one lineup with ease and see which one looks better to you.
Yeah.
Honestly, because the Carr side rates a little better in our personal stack rankings, but I think by most traditional metrics, San Francisco will rate higher. So just build a lineup with both and see which one you like better.
Yep. Sean says, "Congrats, Brian, about your live final." Eli says, "Thanks for the advice on Thursday. Had a great showdown. Subbed out Seahawks defense for Myers at the last minute. Safe to say it was a good decision." Yes, it was.
Yeah, would have been even better if he made that field goal too. So.
Ray says, "Godwin or Deontay Johnson, ROS and standard?"
I'm not sure what this next thing is for Godwin. So just by default health, I'll say Deontay Johnson.
Makes sense. And then Brian says, "Joined late. Sorry if this got asked already, but do you have any idea why the model is rating White so low?"
Yeah, that's a great question. The model seemingly every week finds one guy that it super hates that's highly owned. This week it is Rashad White, and it generally doesn't rate Rashad White that highly every week. So I was looking, just diving into the model a little bit, and there's some betting market movement against Tampa Bay. We already talked about all the injuries. But again, I would side with ownership here. He's really highly owned. And unless you're playing the largest GPPs, I think it's fine to play Rashad White.
Yeah. Let's bump down these last couple of questions. AI says, has Deontay Johnson been discussed? Yeah, he's a good part of the stack. Underperforming wide receiver. That's good. Double J says, thoughts on Texans wide receivers this week? It's a tough matchup for them. Do you have any thoughts about that Houston stack?
Yeah, so I think Nico will get the most of Patrick Surtain. He doesn't shadow, so they'll move guys around. So Denver's defense obviously has been playing better. That stack rate's a little bit lower than I would have thought it would going into the week. But Tank Dell is one of our underperforming wide receivers. Obviously, that big 60-yard catch he had that was called back due to penalty contributes to that last week.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, tougher matchup. There are other stacks we like more. And if breaking the tie, I'll go with the underperforming wide receiver in Tank Dell if I had to play a Houston receiver or if I'm playing that stack.
Yep, absolutely. And then Michael says, hey guys, what do you make of the Houston backfield this week? Any thoughts on that, Brian?
Yeah, so I was of the assumption that last week when Damian Pierce returned, that it would be much more of a split workload, and that they would go back to the pre-injury split there. But Singletary had a good portion of the workload. If you look at the actual snaps, Singletary played 49, and Damian Pierce only played 11. Right? That was a clear number one running back workload for Devin Singletary and got more work in the passing game. So I think if we're going to play a guy here, you have to continue with the trends and play Devin Singletary. And it's not like Pierce did anything to make them change that distribution this week.
Absolutely, yeah. All right, Brian, we got about 8 minutes left. So we talked about a handful of stacks indirectly. Is there any stack that you want to talk about on its own that we haven't talked about?
Yeah, let's just run through our rankings really quickly,
Okay.
8 minutes, and maybe give a reason or two or guys we like in that game. So number 1A is tied with obviously number 1B. So for me, it's Detroit, New Orleans, and Miami, Washington. We've already talked about the Miami, Washington game. Detroit, New Orleans, we talked a little bit about the New Orleans side. I like Detroit here. Goff's number 2 in our model.
Mm-hmm.
They probably will run it down New Orleans' throats, but one of the reasons we have to like this game is, as we hit the top of the show, the injury situation for New Orleans. They're without their best cornerback in Marshawn Lattimore. He is now on injured reserve. Their best pass rusher, Cam Jordan, did not practice all week. He is a game-time decision. Very, very questionable. They're starting strong safety, Marcus May. He is out. They're starting middle linebacker, where's the dot? Pete Warner, he is out. So that's 3 to 4 defensive starters for New Orleans that are going to be out. It's a massive bump to Detroit's offense. And if New Orleans can't get their offense going with so many guys injured on offense too, it could be just a massive blowout game for Detroit. So 2-0, 3-0 type stacks in consideration. If you want to run it back with a cheap one, you can. But Detroit stacks are one of my favorites this week.
Nice. Yeah. My overall stack, that Miami Washington game, I think with the value we talked about opens up so much. Tennessee, Indianapolis, we mentioned it as well. I have it ranked highly, but it's always weird when you have a lock button running back. It's like, how do I fit them in my stack? So you got to fool around with that a little bit just to get there. One other one, San Francisco, Philly. I think that's like 1B across all the other ones where it's just expensive. Everyone else is going to play it, so it's going to be a little bit difficult to. You got to actually work to get that stack in your lineup. Arizona Pitt we talked about, and the other one in my 1BC, whatever you want to call it now, is the Rams and Cleveland. Which, if we're stacking Joe Flacco, are we even alive right now? But I don't think you would stack the Cleveland side. I would definitely only stack the Rams side. Maybe running back with Amari Cooper. Probably wouldn't do much else other than that. What's his name? Cornerback for Cleveland is out, so that does open up a little bit boost for Puka Nacua for the Rams. So I do like him there, and it could be one of those 3-0, 3-1 stacks you get with the other value. So those are my top stacks. I have one more in the two. Probably don't play these actually, but the Chargers, New England. I still wouldn't play anyone from New England, but Chargers, we know they can put up points. They just kind of fit up kind of high in the rankings, but no real reasons that did that. So that's why they're in that next tier below everyone else.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And Normally, I wouldn't be considering anybody from New England, but Demario Douglas and Booty are out, so that does give a pretty clear workload, I would think, for Devontae Parker and Juju Smith-Schuster. So we look for condensed target trees when injuries arise at cheap price tags, and Parker and Juju fit the bill. So I think you can consider them just standalone or as run backs in that stack. Uh, and it sounds like Zappy's going to start there, so I mean it's a shit show all around.
Yeah.
But still, guys that are cheap. One final stack that we've kind of hit on is Denver and Houston moves. That's in that Arizona pit tier for me.
Mm-hmm.
Russ Wilson, like 15% projected ownership is kind of crazy, but Houston is just prone to shootouts and high-scoring games and game stack winning environments. So you have to consider it, despite the ownership. And I think we have enough places to get different, right? Despite the Moss, despite the high-owned studs, there are some other places to get different. A lot of our underperforming wide receivers aren't going to be that popular this week. We talked about the Pittsburgh guys, Terry McLaurin, DeAndre Hopkins, all these underperforming. I mean, huge list this week of actual good players. So I would say there is enough differentiation, even if you want to play popular stacks.
Yeah, that's also true as well. Cool. So we're going to answer these questions, and then really quick, we're going to give our fast food wide receiver of the week, and we're going to get about it here because some real life stuff I have to get to. But Samuel says, is it a three-headed running back type lineup this week?
I think so, right? Anytime we have a lock button running back, it typically leads to more three running back type lineups. And I think if I faded Moss, I would probably only run a two running back lineup with the hopes that, he gets. I don't know what would have to happen there, but yeah, I think in general it's a three running back lineup week.
Okay, cool. Samuel says, for your stack exposures, is it having min 50 exposure of your main stacks too much?
Generally, yes. It depends on your risk reward style and how you feel about playing. Typically, I spread it out a little bit more. I'm normally in the 15 to 20% range for most of my stacks, but there is nothing wrong with going heavy on a handful of guys either, just to be clear. Especially in like 20 max. I think it makes a lot more sense there.
Makes sense to me. Sean says, if you're only making one lineup, Najee or Warren, same question for Montgomery or Gibbs.
Yeah, just we don't have the crystal balls for those guys, right? We expect them to split workload. Who gets the touchdowns and the longer runs is really a coin flip. Models mostly can't predict that. So I think if you just look at our models, I think Montgomery and Harris are higher. But I mean, it wouldn't shock anyone for the opposite to be true either. So sorry, we can't answer that better.
No worries. And then lastly, our wide receiver, fast food wide receiver of the week, less than 5K on DraftKings, less than 10% projected ownership. Brian, I'll go first. I'm going to say A.T. Perry for the Saints.
Back at the A.T. Perry train. And there's some good options this week. We have all the New Orleans guys. We got our boy Greg Dortch still at 5% at $3,700. I think you have to consider him very heavily. Juju is near the top of these rankings for us in our model. So maybe I'll go Juju here, $3,200, 4% owned. Now the number 2 receiver with Demario Douglas out. I'll go Juju for mine.
Perfect. Sounds like a plan. So that'll do it. Again, sorry this show's a little short, but if you have further questions, you can hit us up on Twitter, the Discord, occupyfantasy.com/Discord to find out how to get access to that. Leave a comment on this video if you are watching the replay and you have a question. That's also a thing too. If you did like the video, definitely go ahead and give it a thumbs up and subscribe so we know to do more videos like this in the future. Chris will be in our Discord tomorrow talking through our NFL Live channel. .bets, one of our partners, has a betting show tomorrow as well. So go ahead and check him out. Just go to YouTube, .bets, and he's the first one to show up. But until then, next time from OccupyFantasy.com, Moose and Brian, have a good one. Good luck.
Good luck.